Today, we're going to talk about another writing fundamental that you've probably been working on steadily since elementary school, and that is writing complete sentences. Sometimes it's harder than you would expect, and there's no shame in needing a little brush up on what to do and, importantly, when to break the rules. When is it okay to write a fragment instead of a complete sentence? We're going to talk about those things today. So a complete sentence only has to have three things: a subject, a verb, and then it has to form a complete thought. That complete thought piece is really important. And I think it's something that we often forget to talk about when we are teaching complete sentences in school. The thing is that our brains are actually wired to want to hear complete sentences and complete thoughts. It is satisfying and pleasing inside our heads. And in fact, when we don't hear a complete thought, there's almost like a record scratch, like "Rah," that like stops our brain short. And our brains are running, trying to figure out what was left out. There was just a big study in the UK of lots of different people of different age groups, and they would read a sentence fragment to these people and ask what was missing from the sentence. And in most cases, they found out that people could correctly fill in the sentence with what was missing in the original sentence because our brains work so hard to try to complete thoughts that we can even do it when someone else gives us an incomplete thought a lot of the times. The other thing about complete sentences and complete thoughts is they just sound good in our ears, right? That's why reading or writing out loud is such an important thing to do, because our eyeballs can skim over things that our ears catch. And it sounds nice and satisfying to hear a complete thought. And it sounds strange and harsh and discordant when we hear a fragment that isn't making sense yet. Now, length has absolutely nothing to do with complete sentences at all. A sentence can be long, short, or medium and still be a complete sentence. Here are just three examples from an article in the New York Times. That's more than half my lifetime. Complete sentence. I turned my eyes away from the stairs toward the west-facing front door in the mail slot through which replies from my pen pals in the Philippines, Hong Kong, and Australia landed. I used to find it strange that they started square and sharp-edged and became round as they rose and narrowed, until one day I realized that someone I probably would never know had found this arrangement pleasing and had gone to some trouble to draw or specify it. And I'd realized, too, that we find the world, but also make it. So we have a lot of different kinds of sentences here, right? Lots of different links, but look at this. Subject, verb, complete thought in the short one. Subject, verb, complete thought in the second one. And the third one, if we have proper punctuation, we also can have multiple subjects and multiple verbs together. And it's not a run-on, and it's not a fragment. It is one complete sentence. Subject, verb, complete thought. So, the best tip for figuring out if your sentences are complete is to read them out loud or to have someone else read them out loud, because your brain wants to catch those fragments that aren't quite working yet. It wants to hear complete thoughts, and it's going to yell and scream out to you if something that you have is not a complete thought. But you and I both know that professional writers break this rule all the time and use sentence fragments on purpose. It depends though, right? So we can break the complete sentence rule depending on the genre and the context, our tone and our voice, and our intentions as writers. Now, here's the thing. It still has to make sense. So when we read our writing out loud and we come across a fragment, if it makes sense, depending on these other factors, it could be okay, but it still has to make sense. Otherwise, we're going to leave our reader in the dark. So sometimes it just depends on the genre. A lot of personal writing, opinion writing, personal essays, narratives and short stories. use sentence fragments because maybe they're a little bit more informal kinds of writing, they're a little bit more personal kinds of writing, whereas more formal and academic writing usually doesn't break this rule. In fact, as I was looking at for examples for this lesson, I had a hard time when I was looking at, sort of formal sources like the New York Times, finding news articles, information articles where sentence fragments were used because it's just not the right context for that, right? If you're trying to communicate information to someone, you just want it to be clear. If you're in an academic setting, a very formal setting, you're writing a formal letter, you don't want to use sentence fragments. But if you're writing something a little bit more personal, you're writing something that's maybe a story, then in those contexts, it might be okay. It also depends on your voice and your tone. Using sentence fragments, as you're about to see, tends to be a little bit aggressive, either in a rule breaking, assertive way or in a funny way. Maybe that's the tone you want, and maybe it's not, right? So you need to think about that. Maybe your voice in real life is naturally just kind of strong and assertive. Maybe you're funny. And so when your writing comes out, it's naturally going to come out that way. You might be a person who uses sentence fragments more than other people. And of course, it also depends on your intentions, what you are trying to do. So here are some situations in which sentence fragments are sometimes used, frequently used, in a way that makes it okay to break that complete sentence rule. Here's an example from The Ringer. I'm not complaining, truly, even if I've occasionally felt like everything I've learned about this movie has been against my will. So many vague Twitter trending topics that give way to never ending rabbit holes. So many new links and Spitgate videos to parse in the group chats. So those last two lines are sentence fragments. We're missing a subject and a verb. It should say, there are so many vague Twitter trending topics. There are so many new links. But instead, we get these kind of funny, pithy fragments. So many vague Twitter trending topics, so many new links, right? It kind of makes us chuckle as we read it. So humor is a situation in which the complete sentence rule is also broken. So are situations where the writer wants to surprise the reader by subverting expectations. This is a headline from the New York Times. The raccoons of Central Park move in packs and go fast. Now that's a complete sentence, right? Raccoons is the subject, move and go are the verbs. But then the writer adds a fragment at the end on bikes, right? You're thinking that he's talking about real raccoons in Central Park. And then that little funny fragment is surprising the reader and subverting their expectations. Sometimes fragments can be used to complicate an idea, to take something that seems sort of straightforward and simple and make it a little bit more complicated. Emily Hanford writes, here's what happens in response. Parents who notice there's a problem take care of it themselves, if they can, right? That pause and that short, if they can, makes us stop and be like, what's going on here? It complicates an idea that she's sharing. And then finally, the last time that people often break the complete sentence rule on purpose in a way that works is just to replicate the sound of normal conversational speech. He's writing about House of the Dragon here, and he writes, it's not going great, right? It makes us say in our heads as readers exactly something with the tone and cadence and rhythm that he would have said it out loud in his natural conversational speech. So let's think about this. Where in your writing does it feel like complete sentences are the way to go? You're writing something more formal. You're writing something more academic. You need to be attentive to having a subject and a verb and making a complete thought so that your reader can understand your ideas. Where are you writing something that maybe is a little bit more personal, is a little bit more casual or informal? Where's the place that you need to show off your voice and you want to use a couple of well-placed sentence fragments to add humor or complicate your topic or subvert your reader's expectations? Where might it work to not use complete sentences on purpose? Where can you read your writing out loud to see if it makes sense, to see if it sounds pleasing to your ear? Thanks so much for watching Mini Moves for Writers. Please subscribe so that you don't miss any writing lessons.